The palace was quiet that night. The long corridors were clean and bright, shining under soft yellow lights. Paintings of past kings and queens watched silently from the walls. Thick carpets made every step gentle and slow. Nothing felt dangerous. Nothing felt wrong. Royal Guard Thomas had worked in this palace for 12 years. He knew every corner, every door, every sound. At night, the palace usually felt calm, almost asleep. Guards stood at their posts, clocks ticked softly, and the air felt heavy with old history. Thomas stood near the east corridor, his back straight, his eyes alert. He had learned long ago that danger did not always come with noise. Sometimes it came quietly. Then suddenly, everything changed. A scream broke the silence. "It hurts. Please stop." The sound was sharp and full of fear. It echoed through the corridor like a crack of thunder. Thomas froze for half a second. His heart jumped hard in his chest. He knew that voice. Princess Charlotte. She was young, gentle, and never raised her voice without reason. This was not a normal cry. This was pain. Thomas did not wait for orders. He turned and ran. His boots hit the floor loudly as he moved fast down the corridor. His hand stayed close to his weapon, but his mind was racing faster than his feet. Charlotte was supposed to be safe. She was always watched. Someone had failed. Other guards saw Thomas running. They saw the look on his face. Without questions, 2 of them followed him. Another scream came. Softer now. Weaker. "It hurts. Please." Thomas reached the door to the private family wing. His hand slammed against the handle. The door was not locked. He pushed it open hard. Inside the room, time seemed to stop. Princess Charlotte was on the floor. Her face was pale. Tears covered her cheeks. She was holding her left arm tightly, shaking. Her small body looked fragile against the cold floor. Standing near her was Lady Eleanor. Lady Eleanor was a senior palace attendant. She had worked in royal homes for many years. She was trusted. She was known as calm, quiet, and strict. But now, her face was white. Her eyes were wide. Her hands were shaking. On the floor, near Charlotte's hand, lay a small metal object. It looked harmless, but something about it felt wrong. Thomas moved instantly. "Step away from the princess," he said loudly. Lady Eleanor took a step back, her mouth opening as if she wanted to speak, but no words came out. 2 more guards entered the room. One rushed to Charlotte's side. The other stood near Eleanor. Thomas knelt down slowly. "Your Highness," he said gently, "you are safe now." Charlotte tried to speak. Her lips moved, but she cried out in pain instead. Her grip on her arm tightened. Thomas felt anger rise inside him, hot and strong. But his training held him still. Within minutes, the palace doctor arrived. Charlotte was lifted carefully and placed on the bed. The doctor checked her arm while Queen Catherine rushed into the room, her face full of fear. "What happened?" Catherine asked, her voice shaking. Charlotte looked at her mother and burst into tears. "She grabbed me," Charlotte said softly. "I told her to stop. She didn't." Queen Catherine's face changed. Fear turned into something colder. Lady Eleanor was escorted out of the room by guards. She kept saying the same words again and again. "It was a mistake. I didn't mean it. It was an exercise." But no one listened. The door closed behind her. The palace felt different after that. The air felt heavy. Guards whispered. Staff avoided eye contact. Something had broken, and everyone felt it. Prince William was informed immediately. He stood in his office, staring at the wall as the head of security explained what had happened. His jaw tightened with every word. Where was she taken? William asked. "To her room, sir. The doctor is with her." William nodded once. "And the attendant?" "Detained for questioning." William's hands clenched into fists. "How does this happen?" he asked quietly. No one answered. That night, Queen Catherine sat beside Charlotte's bed. The room was dark except for a small lamp. Charlotte's arm was wrapped in white bandages. She looked small and tired. "I was scared," Charlotte whispered. Catherine kissed her forehead. "I know, my love. You did nothing wrong." Charlotte looked down. She said it was for training. She said I had to learn. Catherine's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed calm. "No one is allowed to hurt you. Ever. Outside the room, Thomas stood guard. He had been ordered to rest, but he refused. He could not leave. He kept hearing the scream in his head. "It hurts. Please stop." He knew one thing clearly. If he had arrived even a little later, something worse could have happened. The next morning, King Charles was informed in private. He listened without interruption. When the report ended, the room was silent. "This matter will be handled fully," the king said at last. Quietly, but completely. An investigation began. Security footage was reviewed. Every second mattered. Prince William watched the screen closely. He saw Lady Eleanor enter the room. He saw Charlotte step back. He saw Eleanor grab her arm. William turned away. "That is not a mistake," he said. Questions were asked across the palace. Staff were interviewed. Old files were reopened. Complaints from the past were reviewed again. And then something strange appeared. Lady Eleanor had been moved many times over the years. From one royal home to another, each move followed small reports. Nothing serious enough to cause action. Just notes. Just concerns. Bruises. Tays. Fear. All ignored. Until now. That evening, a guard found an envelope slipped under a door near the security office. There was no name, no mark, just one line written inside. She was not the first. Prince William read it slowly. His blood turned cold. "How many more?" he whispered. In her room, Charlotte looked out the window at the dark sky. She did not understand everything that was happening, but she felt it. Something big had started, something that could not be stopped. And it all began with one scream in a quiet corridor. Morning came slowly to the palace, but peace did not return with the light. The sun shone through tall windows, touching golden frames in quiet halls, yet everyone felt the same fear from the night before. Princess Charlotte did not sleep well. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the pain in her arm and the cold look on Lady Eleanor's face. She sat up in bed as Queen Catherine entered the room. "Good morning, my brave girl," Catherine said softly. Charlotte tried to smile, but it did not reach her eyes. "Is she gone?" Charlotte asked. Catherine paused for a moment. "Yes. She cannot hurt you again." Charlotte nodded, but the fear inside her did not fully leave. Outside, Royal Guard Thomas stood at his post. His face looked calm, but inside, his mind was restless. He kept thinking about the moment he opened the door. He knew he had acted without orders, but no punishment came. Instead, his superiors thanked him quietly. That told him something important. The palace knew this was serious. Prince William walked through the halls with fast steps. Staff moved aside when they saw him. His face was firm, his eyes sharp. He stopped at the security office. "Any new information?" he asked. The head of security handed him a folder. Past reports. Old complaints. Some were never followed. William opened the folder and read slowly. His jaw tightened. "These were ignored," he said. "Why?" "They were small at the time. Also they seemed." William closed the folder. Pain is never small. In a guarded room on the other side of the palace, Lady Eleanor sat alone. Her hands rested on the table. They shook slightly. Guards stood near the door. She stared at the wall, replaying the moment again and again. "I didn't mean to hurt her," she whispered to herself. "I was told to be firm." But deep down, she knew the truth was not that simple. Later that day, police officers arrived quietly. No sirens. No noise. The palace did not want the public to know. Not yet. Lady Eleanor was questioned for hours. "Why did you close the door?" one officer asked. "I wanted privacy," she replied. "Why did the princess ask you to stop?" She was resisting. Resisting what? Eleanor stayed silent. At the same time, Queen Catherine sat with King Charles and Prince William in a private room. The mood was heavy. "This cannot be hidden forever," Catherine said. "Charlotte is hurt." King Charles nodded slowly. "But we must act carefully. The truth must be clear." William leaned forward. "We owe her more than silence." The king looked at his son. "Then find the full truth." That evening, another letter appeared. This time, it was left near the old library. A guard found it during his rounds. Inside were 3 words. She warned them. Prince William read it twice. His chest felt tight. "Who is sending these?" he asked. No one had an answer. The investigation grew deeper. Former palace staff were contacted. Some refused to speak. Some cried when asked. One former maid finally agreed to talk. She sat with her hands folded, her voice low. "She scared us," the maid said. "If we complained, we were moved or ignored." "Why didn't you go to the police?" William asked. The maid looked down. "Who would believe us?" The words cut deep. That night, Prince William visited Charlotte's room. He sat beside her bed. "How is your arm?" he asked gently. "It still hurts," Charlotte replied. "But the doctor says it will heal." William nodded. "You were very brave." Charlotte looked at him. "Will she come back?" "No," William said firmly. "I promise." Charlotte relaxed slightly. As days passed, the palace changed. New rules were made. Staff will watch closely. Guards doubled their patrols. But fear still moved through the halls like a shadow. Lady Eleanor was officially charged. When she was escorted out of the palace, she did not look angry. She looked empty. Cameras caught nothing. The public was told it was a private matter. Rumors started, but no details were given. Inside the palace, the truth was clear. Charlotte's scream had saved others. Royal Guard Thomas stood in the same corridor where it all began. He looked at the door, now always open. He knew this story would stay with him forever. The palace would heal. Charlotte would heal. But the silence that once had pain was gone, and it would never return. The palace looked calm from the outside, but inside, nothing felt the same. Every sound felt louder. Every step felt watched. The walls, once proud and silent, now seemed to remember secrets. Princess Charlotte's arm was healing, but her heart was slower to recover. She walked through the halls with her mother or guard beside her. She no longer liked closed doors. If one closed, she felt her chest tighten. Queen Catherine noticed everything. One morning, Catherine sat with Charlotte near the large garden window. Birds sang outside, but Charlotte barely listened. "Do you want to go outside?" Catherine asked gently. Charlotte shook her head. "Not today." Catherine did not push her. She held her daughter's hand and stayed quiet. Sometimes silence was safer than words. Across the palace, Prince William met with the head of security again. More reports were coming in. More old staff members were speaking. "There are patterns," the officer said. "Not just Eleanor. Others covered for her." William's eyes darkened. "Names." The officer slid a list across the table. William read each name slowly. Trusted people. People who had smiled at his children. "This does not end with one person," William said. "No, sir," the officer replied. In a quiet room far from the family wing, Royal Guard Thomas sat alone for the first time in days. He had been praised, thanked, and even promoted, but it did not ease his mind. He kept thinking of the door. What if it had been locked? What if he had arrived later? The questions never left him. That afternoon, Charlotte surprised everyone. "I want to talk," she said softly. Queen Catherine looked at her. "To whom, my love?" "To the lady who writes things down," Charlotte replied. They understood. A child counselor had been quietly brought into the palace. She was kind, patient, and calm. She spoke slowly and listened carefully. Charlotte sat across from her, holding a small stuffed toy. "Can you tell me what you felt?" the counselor asked. Charlotte thought for a long time. "I felt small," she said, "and I felt like no one would hear me." Queen Catherine felt tears rise but stayed silent. The counselor nodded. "But someone did hear you." Charlotte looked up. "The guard." "Yes," the counselor smiled. "He heard you, and because you spoke, others are safe now." Charlotte did not smile, but something in her eyes changed. Meanwhile, the investigation reached outside the palace walls. Police found records of complaints made years ago, all marked as handled internally. Internally meant hidden. Prince William was angry, but he stayed calm. He knew anger alone would not fix this. King Charles called a private council. "This family stands for duty," the king said. If we fail that duty, we correct it openly. William nodded. Then we must speak the truth. But carefully, the king replied, for Charlotte. The decision was made. A controlled statement would be released. Not every detail, but enough to show action. The palace announced that a senior staff member had been removed and charged after harming a minor. New protections were promised. Independent oversight was added. The public reacted strongly. Some were shocked. Some were angry. Some were proud that action was taken. But inside the palace, another shock waited. A former staff member arrived unannounced. Her name was Margaret. She was old now. Her hands shook as she walked with a cane. Guards wanted to stop her, but Prince William ordered them to let her in. Margaret sat across from William and Catherine. I stayed silent for years, she said. I should not have. She took a deep breath. She hurt another child, Margaret whispered. Long ago. Not badly enough to leave marks, but enough to leave fear. Catherine closed her eyes. Why didn't anyone stop it? William asked. Margaret's voice broke. Because we were told not to see it. The truth spread like fire. Charlotte was not the first. She was the one who ended it. That night, Charlotte could not sleep. She sat up in bed, staring at the door. A soft knock came. It was Thomas. He stood outside, not entering. Your Highness, I just wanted you to know, the door will stay open. Always. Charlotte nodded. Thank you. When he left, she felt something new. Safety. Days turned into weeks. Charlotte returned slowly to her lessons. She laughed again, though not as freely, but she laughed. Queen Catherine watched closely. She did not rush healing. She knew healing needed time. Prince William changed palace rules himself. No child was ever alone with one adult again. Doors stayed open. Cameras were checked daily. Some staff resigned. Others were removed. The palace cleaned itself from the inside. One afternoon, Charlotte stood in the corridor where it all began. She held her mother's hand. I don't like this place, Charlotte said. Catherine nodded. Neither do I. But, Charlotte continued, I was brave here. Catherine smiled softly. Yes, you were. The corridor no longer felt dark. Light poured in from the windows. Guards stood calmly, alert but gentle. The palace was changing, not because of power, but because a child spoke the truth, and because someone listened. The palace entered a new phase, but peace did not come easily. Even though the truth was now known, the weight of it stayed in every room. It was like a shadow that followed everyone, reminding them that safety must never be assumed. Princess Charlotte continued her sessions with the counselor. Some days were easy. Some days were hard. On hard days, she spoke very little. She just held her toy and listened. One afternoon, she asked a question that made everyone pause. Why didn't they listen before? Charlotte asked quietly. The counselor did not answer quickly. Sometimes adults are afraid of trouble, she said gently. But fear should never be stronger than care. Charlotte nodded, trying to understand. Queen Catherine watched from the corner of the room. She felt guilt even though she knew she had done nothing wrong. A mother's heart always looked backward, searching for missed signs. That same day, Prince William walked through a less-used wing of the palace. This part of the building held old offices and unused rooms. It was quiet, dusty, forgotten. He stopped in front of one door. This was Eleanor's first posting, the head of security said. William stared at the door. Open it. Inside, the room was small. Old files filled the shelves. Some folders had yellowed with age. William began to read. Names, dates, short notes, child upset. Handled internally. No further action. William closed his eyes. These words protected the wrong people, he said. The head of security nodded. We failed. William turned to him. Then we fix it. Fully. A new order was signed that very night. An independent council would review all past complaints, not just from this palace, but from every royal residence. Some advisors warned him, this will bring criticism. William's answer was calm. So be it. News of the changes reached the staff quickly. Some felt relief. Others felt fear. Royal Guard Thomas was assigned a new role. He was now part of a special unit focused only on family protection. The honor felt heavy. One evening, Thomas stood outside Charlotte's room. He did not feel proud. He felt responsible. "I will never ignore a sound again," he told another guard quietly. Inside her room, Charlotte was drawing. She drew doors, always open, with light coming through. "Why are all the doors open?" Catherine asked gently. "So people can hear," Charlotte replied. Catherine hugged her tightly. As the days passed, the palace received letters. Some were supportive. Some were angry. Some told stories from long ago, written by people who had once worked behind the walls. One letter stood out. "I was a child helper here once. I was afraid, but no one asked me why." Prince William read it slowly. Then he folded it and placed it in a special box. "These voices matter," he said. Lady Eleanor's trial date was set. It would not be public, but justice would be done. Still, the palace prepared for attention. Cameras gathered outside. Reporters waited. Charlotte did not understand trials, but she felt the tension. "Is something bad going to happen again?" she asked her father. William knelt beside her. "No, something right is happening." Charlotte looked at him. "Because I spoke?" "Yes," he said, "because you spoke." The day of the trial arrived quietly. Eleanor entered the building with her head down. No royal family member attended, but the weight of their presence filled the room. Testimonies were given. Evidence was shown. Past patterns were made clear. When the decision came, it was firm. Guilty. Lady Eleanor was sentenced. Her power, her position, her silence were gone. Back at the palace, Catherine sat with Charlotte in the garden. "The lady will not come back," Catherine said. Charlotte was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I don't feel scared anymore." Catherine smiled through tears. But healing was not only for Charlotte. The palace itself had to heal. Prince William ordered new training for all staff. Not just rules, but understanding. They learned how to listen, how to speak up, how to protect without fear. Some older staff struggled with change. Others welcomed it. "This palace feels different," one maid whispered. "Lighter." One night, a storm hit the palace. Rain beat against the windows. Thunder rolled across the sky. Charlotte woke suddenly, frightened. She sat up, her heart racing. Before she could cry out, the door opened gently. It was Queen Catherine. "I heard you move," she said. Charlotte hugged her tightly. "I thought I was alone." "You never are," Catherine replied. Outside, Thomas stood guard. The storm reminded him of that first scream. But now, instead of fear, he felt something else. Trust. The next morning, Charlotte walked through the corridor again. This time, she did not rush. She did not look away. Sunlight filled the space. Guards nodded to her, respectful and calm. Charlotte stopped and looked around. "This place is not bad anymore," she said. Catherine smiled. "Because people changed." Prince William watched from a distance. He knew the work was not finished. It never would be, but the palace had learned a hard lesson. Power without care was dangerous. Silence could harm, and even the smallest voice could bring change. That night, William wrote in his journal, "Let this family be remembered not for hiding pain, but for ending it." And somewhere deep inside the palace walls, a quiet promise was made. Never again. The palace woke to a quiet morning, different from all the mornings before. The air felt clean, almost new, as if the walls themselves had taken a deep breath. Birds sang in the gardens, and sunlight moved gently through the tall windows. The storm that had shaken the palace for so long had finally passed. Princess Charlotte stood near her window, watching the garden below. Her arm had healed. The bandages were gone. Only a faint memory of pain remained. She still remembered everything, but the fear no longer controlled her. Queen Catherine entered the room and smiled. "Good morning." Charlotte toned. "Good morning, Mama." There was something stronger in her voice now. Down the hall, Prince William prepared for an important day. It was not a public ceremony. There would be no crowns or music. But to him, it mattered more than many royal events. Today, the palace would officially announce the new Child Protection Charter. William stood before a mirror, straightening his jacket. He looked older than he had months ago, but also wiser. Pain had taught him something power never could. King Charles joined him. "You did the right thing," the king said quietly. William nodded. "We should have done it sooner." Charles placed a hand on his son's shoulder. "What matters is that it was done." In the great meeting room, staff gathered. Guards, helpers, advisors, teachers, everyone who worked within palace walls stood together. Some looked nervous. Some looked hopeful. Prince William stepped forward. "This palace exists because of trust," he said calmly. "When trust is broken, we do not hide it. We repair it." He spoke in simple words. No grand speeches. No excuses. "From today," he continued, "every child in royal care will be protected by clear rules. No silence. No fear. No closed doors." A quiet agreement filled the room. Royal Guard Thomas stood at the back. He listened closely. He felt pride, but also humility. He knew one brave moment did not make a hero. What mattered was what came after. Later that day, Charlotte walked hand in hand with her parents through the garden. Flowers were blooming. The air smelled sweet. "Can I play?" Charlotte asked. "Yes," Catherine replied. Charlotte ran ahead, her laughter light and free. William and Catherine watched her. "She sounds like herself again," Catherine whispered. William smiled. She found her voice. Nearby, Thomas watched from a distance. He remembered the first night, the scream, the fear. Now he heard laughter instead. That evening, something unexpected happened. Charlotte asked to speak at the family dinner. Everyone paused. She stood carefully, holding her glass of water with both hands. "I want to say something," she said. The room was silent. "I was scared before," Charlotte continued. "But when I spoke, people listened. That made me brave." Tears filled Catherine's eyes. Charlotte looked at her parents. "I want other children to feel safe too." William stood and walked to her. He knelt and hugged her. "You already helped many," he said softly. The palace announced the new rules to the public the next day. This time, there were no secrets. The message was clear. Mistakes were made. They were faced. They were fixed. Public reaction was strong. Some praised the honesty. Some criticized the delay. But many felt something rare. Respect. Letters arrived from families, teachers, and even other royal houses. "Thank you for speaking. Thank you for listening. Thank you for protecting." Charlotte did not read all the letters, but Catherine told her about them. "They are proud of you," Catherine said. Charlotte smiled shyly. "I just told the truth." Weeks passed. The palace settled into a new rhythm. Doors stayed open. God spoke more. Children were never left unheard. Thomas trained younger guards now. He taught them one simple rule. If you hear fear, you move. One evening, Thomas walked the same corridor where it had all begun. He stopped, listening. Only silence. But this time, silence felt safe. Charlotte grew stronger each day. She returned to her studies, her games, her joy. Sometimes she asked hard questions, but her parents always answered honestly. "Why do bad things happen?" she once asked William. He thought for a moment. "Because people forget to care." "Will they forget again?" Charlotte asked. William shook his head. "Not if we remember together." On a bright afternoon, the palace held a small private ceremony. No cameras, no reporters, just family and staff. King Charles stepped forward and placed a simple medal in Thomas's hand. "For courage," the king said, "and for listening." Thomas bowed, speechless. Charlotte clapped the loudest. Afterward, she walked up to Thomas. "Thank you for coming when I called," she said. Thomas smiled gently. "Always." As the sun set, Catherine stood alone in the garden. She thought about the past months, the fear, the anger, the guilt. William joined her. "We changed something important," he said. "Yes," Catherine replied, "but we must protect it." They looked toward the palace windows, glowing warmly in the evening light. Inside, Charlotte was drawing again. This time, she drew people standing together, hands linked, doors wide open. Above them, she drew light. The palace would always carry history, some of it proud, some of it painful. But now, it carried something else too. A lesson learned, a voice heard, a promise kept. And as night fell over the palace, one truth stood clear and strong. Real royalty was not about crowns or power. It was about courage. And it began with a child who said, "Please stop," and a world that finally listened.